Alrighty, and we're on.
We're on.
Yes, so I'm here with Cem Onur.
Yep.
And we've been talking about, obviously, Champ, if you can't see him and you're listening to the audio, Champ Mouthguards. And I reached out to you guys a little while ago, because obviously I do a podcast, and it was funny, like, we were heading back. So I was doing Alta stuff with Richie. We're up in Queensland, and then literally we're, like, heading onto the plane from the Gold Coast to come back to Sydney. And Cem was standing behind us, and he goes, "Hey, are you guys from Alta?" And then we struck up a bit of a conversation, and it was convenient. We've caught up now in Sydney and talked a bit of business, but we're not here to talk business on the podcast today. We're actually talking a little bit, more about life holistically and obviously the genesis of Champ as well.
Yeah.
So for people that don't know, and this is the thing that I always say about if you're going to do any sort of combat sports, it's really important to actually have a fitted mouthguard.
Yep.
Especially if you plan to compete. There's been shows where I've been commentating or ring announcing, and I've seen people get punched and their mouthguard literally flies out of their mouth. And that's not what you want to happen in competition sport, especially in combat sports, right? So, so I always say, if you're going to get a mouthguard, there are two main companies in Sydney that do them, but Champ is obviously one of them. And we'll obviously talk about, a bit about, some of the stuff you're doing in other field sports and things like that, because I think that's really good to talk about. But for people that don't know you, Cem, where did you grow up? And I guess, let's talk a little bit about the early stages of your life.
Yeah, so early stages of my life, I was basically born and raised in East Lakes, where there was a big community of the Turkish community there. My mother was a young mum. She was divorced when I was about 5, so there was a bit of a transition there from a Turkish culture when she then married an Aussie. So that basically changed the dynamics of my upbringing, I guess, where in the Turkish community, I guess early on those days, it wasn't all about sport. I guess it was more around family. And then when my stepfather came into it with an Australian background, he got me involved into sport very early as well in the rugby league community.
Yep.
So, I can remember in kindergarten at Mascot Primary School when the South Sydney Rabbitohs came to visit, and that was it. I wanted to be a Rabbitoh from that moment on in. And then I went and joined the Marsh Brothers Mustangs at that stage, and I was quite disappointed when I went there and I got my jersey and it wasn't red and green. I was like, what's going on?
Yeah, I want to be a Rabbitoh.
I wanted to be a Rabbitoh, and ended up with this completely different colour. But yeah, that's how the sort of passion for sport started, and it sort of grew from there.
So, okay, when you were young and obviously your biological dad left the picture, like, did anything click for you? Like, were you like, oh, that's weird, where's he gone? Or
yeah, look, I guess I was young. Different story for my sister, who was 5 years older than me. So she was 10 at the time. So she could see a lot more. But I think for me it was more or less just confusion, I guess. Like, as in, okay, what's going on, sort of thing.
Yep.
Certain things have happened in terms of, promises weren't made from my dad, like where he was going to get me a bike, didn't happen, or we were supposed to go out together on a play day and he didn't show, so it was like, why, sort of thing. So these are sort of the things that occurred, but again, I was quite young, so it didn't affect me as much. But as I started to get older, I started to see certain things where, again, being in sport, you do have the father-son bond, and I didn't quite get that.
Yep.
And although my biological father, my stepfather was a great provider, that emotional connection wasn't really there.
Yeah.
So as I grow older now, and I was able to rekindle the relationship to some extent with my biological father. This was back in 2008 when I went and seen him for the first time in 20 years. We hadn't communicated at all. And in that trip in Turkey is where he lived. I only spent three nights with him. But it was really hard to say goodbye at the airport after that third day, even though 20 years there hasn't been any emotional connection. But I was able to finally get that father-son connection, if that makes sense, and that belonging, I guess.
Yep.
So it was really, really hard to say goodbye. But look, there were decisions that he made that I probably didn't quite understand, but to some extent, you got to say, well, any father or any parent to walk away from their own kids wouldn't be easy.
No.
So for me, it was, okay, he did what he did.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, he's your biological father. And I just wanted to make sure that anything that was sitting with me, I got off my chest, and I didn't want to have any regrets.
Yep.
So 2 weeks ago, he did pass away at the age of 63. So I'm glad I went out of my own way to be the better person, invest in what I could in terms of the relationship. He got to meet my wife. He got to meet my firstborn child, which was his first grandchild. He has 2 kids of his own there.
Yep.
So, yeah, I'm happy that I did that.
Yeah. I always wonder, and me just thinking about it, trying to put myself in your biological father's shoes, right? Like, was there any regret from his perspective? Like, did you feel like he not to say that maybe he didn't regret his decision of moving away because he might have had something else that was, causing him to have to move away.
Yeah.
But the regret of like my son's all grown up and I missed it all.
Yeah, you could see the moment when I did come back into the picture. He was so proud, like his firstborn was back, and you could see that proud moment. In terms of regrets, any father, I guess, whether you're good or bad, would have some form of regret walking away from the kids that you sort of brought into this life and raised. I would only assume so. But in terms of the story around why he left was because, look, any immigrant coming from another country at that stage, to here in the 80s, I think it was. Yeah, it was in the 80s, obviously. That's when I was born.
Yeah.
It was hard. It was hard. And being the oldest of 3 brothers, he had a family business back at home, which was doing quite well. And to come here and trying to make a living, it was quite difficult at that stage. So the relationship was breaking down with him and my mother. So it sort of made sense for him, I guess, to go back home, which is what he did. In terms of the regrets, look, I'd say he would have had regrets, but his excuses for why he did just didn't sit well with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you, and this is me speaking a little bit about my own relationship with my dad, right? Like I was saying just before we started this podcast that for the longest time I had some resentment towards my dad over some of the actions, he took and choices that he made in life that impacted our family. And it was like, for me, it was almost like I held on to it for so long that eventually it was just like one day I and this is exactly what happened. I dreamt about it that like it doesn't hurt me anymore, right?
Yep.
And I just woke up that day and I was like, okay, I'm over it. Like I don't. The only person that's hurting to hold on to this resentment is me.
Yep.
So I don't necessarily have to forget what he's done because it's a good life lesson for me of choices that I don't want to make.
Yep.
But I can forgive the mistake because obviously, each individual is going through, whatever they're going through. I can't say, what his circumstances were when he made those choices.
Yep.
But, I had to let it go because, it was just chewing me up.
Yeah.
Not, probably, I don't know, like I'm assuming that obviously it impacted him as well.
Yeah.
But, when you're sort of like blinded by being angry at the person, you don't think about their position either.
Yeah.
So for you, like, did you carry a lot of resentment as you were growing up and you started to become a bit more aware about it?
I wouldn't say I carried resentment. I was more confused at why a father would do such a thing. But then again, like you said, you put yourselves in their shoes and there's obviously, people deal with things differently.
Yep.
And that's the way he dealt with it, was to cut ties, walk away and try and move on with his life. Look, I just put myself in his shoes and look, whilst I respect him as a person and yeah, he's done things the way he deals with things. It's not the way I would deal with it.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you got to move forward.
Yep.
And holding resentment, I never did hold any resentment. I was more just confused around the decisions he made. And I just wanted to move forward and say, okay, well, there is an opportunity for me to do something with this relationship the way I want it to be, in terms of the way I want this relationship to go down forward. And that's what I did. My sister's a different story, my older sister. She holds a bit more resentment towards him. And she's made an effort to go out and see him when she was a bit younger, and it wasn't met reciprocal to an extent sort of thing. So she sort of cut ties completely and she doesn't see him as her father.
Yeah.
For me, I went, look, he did what he did, but we've got to move forward. He's your biological parent. Without him, you wouldn't be in this world. And You just got to do what's right by you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a very difficult one. You know, each individual has to process it their own way.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's also important that as a person, you don't let it define your life, right? Like,
Correct.
It's just like, you know, I always talk about this, you know, that you dealt this certain hand of cards.
Yep.
And there's no point complaining about the game. It's about how you play those
100%.
those particular cards.
And
right?
you take learnings from experiences.
Yeah.
It's so important. And every experience is a learning. And for me, and we'll go into this, I guess, with Champ, you know, my 2 kids, I've got 2 girls, one's 7 and one's just turned 4 today.
Yep.
Both girls.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to Alyssa. So I guess I just want to do right by my girls.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've had to make sacrifices, no doubt, like my dad did. But any opportunity that I can to try and invest some time into them is what I'm looking to do. That's my mission right now. So there have been sacrifices with my eldest in particular when the business started with Champ Mouthguards. She was just born at the stage as well. I wasn't around for my wife, and that was tough. And the connection there with my eldest wasn't as close as what my connection with my youngest is, because I was there a lot more. But given the time back, I've now gone out of my way to try and build that relationship with my eldest. We went camping, just her and I, with some friends of ours, the boys went out camping, and I took my daughter, and just sort of those bonding sessions where I can. And even where we used to go and do movie dates with my daughter, my oldest daughter and I, and we'd sit there, we'd have popcorn and ice cream, and we sort of made a regular thing. So anything that I can invest back into that relationship, I'm doing now.
Yeah. It's, you know, to digress a bit, like, obviously I like to, you know, sort of build up the story, but because we're talking about it, I think, you know, a lot of guys, especially when we have kids and we're working, we've got careers, like, we get carried away in the sense that, you know, we think, you know, our role as a provider, we want to provide for our family. And sometimes we get consumed by that a little bit. And I think, you know, provided that you can recognize that and you can address it, it's okay. It's the guys who get stuck in that loop of thinking that all I need to do is keep providing and my family will be happy, when all your family wants is time with dad or time with their husband. And, you know, there's a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, I guess it's what you know, how you've been raised. So, for example, my family were in business, so they were working 12 to 13 hours, so that was normal for me. Whereas for my wife, that's not normal. So my wife sort of pulled me in the line saying, hey, pull up, spend some time with your family, and she ended up making me a better person because of it. Because if I didn't have her pull me up, it was normal. You know, you go and work your 12, 13 hours, you work hard, you provide for the family. So, yeah, it's important, I guess, to reflect. Have a look at what's happening. But sometimes you need an outer influence to really digress, I guess. Because if you don't know any different, you're going to keep doing the same thing.
Well, like that's exactly the same as my parents. Like, migrant parents came to Australia and they ran their own businesses. So they worked long hours. Like, it was, for me, a normal dinner time as a kid was maybe 9:30, 10 o'clock at night.
I can relate.
So, and like, you know, it's crazy because like now my household's like the total opposite. You know, if, like for us, 6:30 is a late dinner. Right. So, but you know, you learn those lessons, and I guess for me, when it came to then like looking at careers and things like that, I moved away from wanting to work for myself, because just seeing how much effort my parents put into that. And so, you know, I went down the corporate pathway instead. But then, you know, in the end, I think anybody that has some kind of initiative ends up always coming back to work for themselves, right? And it's just about, you know, trying to find the right balance in terms of how you do that, as opposed to letting it consume you, so that you can have the best of both worlds. Because even like working for other people, like I can relate to your story about, you know, the relationship with the eldest. Like when I managed through the COVID time to have some time off, and so, you know, there was 2 years there with my third child where like she's through and through a daddy's girl. You know, like she wants me for everything, and my wife probably says that, you know, whatever I did in raising her, I've raised her a monster, because like she had the biggest tantrums. She's the hardest one to deal with in the household, and compared to like the first two who, you know, spent most of the time with mum. And like, you know, it's just one of those things you realize how much you missed out on. Right. So, you know, when the first two were around, I was working, you know, 5.5, 6 days a week in the car dealerships, and, you know, it's not always long hours, but sometimes long hours. And so when you realize how much you miss, you know, you sort of, it's not to say that like I sport her or like, obviously she grew up different because dad's a very different animal to mum, you know, like mum Ange would, you know, do a lot of things that sort of like would remodel her life around them, whereas I would model Eden's life, my third child, to follow me, and she'd go and do the things that dad liked to do and sit around and watch dad do things and participate in those sorts of activities. Yep. So it's interesting, you know, I don't think it's all necessarily nurture. I think a lot of it is actually her natural nature that she's going to be that kind of a kid. And maybe I've enabled that, you know, because she sorts of sees the things that I'm into and probably models maybe some of her behavior from me. Maybe not the tantrums. I don't throw that many tantrums, but it's interesting, right?
It is, and I guess you see your little version in your kids. Obviously, some take the mother's side, and obviously some take the father's side, and it's bizarre. My eldest takes my wife's side, in many ways, and the little one takes my side. Yep. It's bizarre, and I guess, like you said, you just enable them.
Yep. Okay, so you know, you mentioned the influence of your stepfather in terms of the sporting stuff.
Yep.
What about like you know, your relationship with your mum? Like, obviously, do you have a very strong bond with her as a result of like her being like sort of not the sole parent? Like, obviously, you had your stepdad in the picture, but that biological connection and
so the relationship I have with my mum, it's like a best friend. Because she was so young, she could relate as well. And she was growing up in a very, very strict family, very, very strict, with her mother. So she used her experiences to then make a decision how she wanted to be a mother for her kids. And the relationship we had with mum was, we could tell her anything, like anything. She knew we were going to go out and do things, but she said, look, as long as I know what you guys are doing, then I'm at peace. If something goes wrong, I know how to handle the situation. So her having that open mind allowed us to go and experience life and confining her if we come across into a problem. I don't know how much to share here, but
well, is there a story that comes to mind about a problem that you got into and mum's helped you?
Just look, I was young, end of high school, outside of high school, went into the clubbing scene with some friends, and let's just say I was experimenting with drugs and things like that, and she knew. And at the end of the day, she said, look, I need to know just in case something wrong happens, And it got to the point where I was probably abusing it too much in terms of going out, doing the whole day clubs, and then backing up to play football and coaching on a Sunday. And it got to the point where mum said, hey, look, I'm concerned. Enough's enough. And that's all I needed for me to stop.
Really?
Yeah. So when you have that level of respect for someone who allows you to do things, but then has concern when you are, hey, look, you're crossing the line now. You sort of you listen. Versus someone who says, no, you can't do that from the get-go. You sort of, you challenge them. You don't do what they say, sort of thing. Whereas someone says, go and experience life. But hey, when you're crossing the line, enough's enough. That was enough for me to stop, change my whole friend circle. Started to save a shitload of money.
Wow.
From not going out as much. Enabled me to buy my first investment property at the age of 21.
Wow.
Then what ended up happening was I ended up becoming an influence for my friends who were also stuck in that sort of scene, if that makes sense. And then they looked at ways to get out. And then that's how it sort of, it was quite unique. That relationship with my mum, it's amazing.
That's a beautiful thing to happen.
Yeah.
To have that, I think a lot of loved ones get, into that cycle where if there's somebody that they're concerned about and they're trying to help them, but then it's like they can't get that connection to break through.
Yep.
So for you to have that respect for your mum in that sense that you had such a great relationship that when she saw that, okay, enough's enough, and then you've just gone, okay, no problem, and you just turned it around, I think that's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah, like the connection with your mum, or my mum in particular, I just seen her as a best friend, and because I guess she was the only one around for a little while, you know what I mean, as mum, because dad was obviously not there. But it was just that relationship that she was quite encouraging for us to go out and travel, see the world. So, she was really, really pushing us to live the
experience
most
life.
Experience life, and that was the best part. She even cautioned me about getting married and having kids. She goes, if she could go back, she would never get married. She goes, just go and have fun.
I see. My mum was like the typical Asian mum, right? Tiger mum. Every day when I was young, she'd be sending me to something, whether it was like music or Chinese classes or tutoring and all this sort of stuff. The one good thing that I think I pulled out of that was that, because like from basically kindergarten to year 6, I was always doing something. And, when I had a bit more freedom in years 7, 8, 9, and 10, it was just like, okay, I'm not going to study. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to enjoy life and hang out with my mates and do all that sort of stuff. But then when it came time to actually like knuckle down for like the HSC and things like that, the one good thing about, how she raised me was that I could look back on those times when I was in primary school and reflect and be like, you know what? Like, it's not that I'm a dumb kid. It's just that, I need to not give myself a choice. And if I don't have a choice other than to do the work and to do the things that I need to do, then I'll be successful. Just then the timing sort of happened in terms of like what happened with my parents sort of happened, and then my mum had some mental health issues, and so then I really didn't have a choice. And so like, from basically towards the end of high school through to uni, when I started my career in the automotive, and I was like, studying at uni, training, martial arts still, at TAFE 1 day a week. Like, it was the craziest time of my life, but I felt like I didn't have a choice. And I feel like that's that lesson that she gave me of like, it was almost invaluable that, I can do anything I want, but like when you're a kid and you don't have a choice because you just listen to whatever mum and dad tell you, that was a lesson that I took away. And that's something that I'm actually very grateful to my mum for, that she showed me that I can be pushed and my limits are actually really a lot higher than what people would assume. And so that was like sort of what defined me in those years, I did 2 degrees. I was at uni. I finished my uni course a year early. I did an apprenticeship at the same time. Was working, one day at TAFE, was at my TAFE 1 day a week, and then working the 38-hour week kind of thing. And so that's interesting, like that, like 2 totally different parenting styles. And like the difference, I guess, for me now is that, my mum will still badger me about things, and it's just like, yes, mum, okay, just keep her happy, just nod and smile and move on. Whereas, I think, your relationship with your mum, you're probably still quite close with her, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Real close. I go into my way trying to take her out for lunch.
Yeah.
Just have that time, mum and I. And I'm trying to encourage my half brother, half sister now to do the same.
Yep.
So mum remarried, and they had 2 kids of their own. One's 25 and the other one's 24. So I say to them, listen, our parents are getting old.
Yeah.
I said, don't take it for granted. I said, you guys don't have the time that your sister and I had in terms of spending time and creating memories.
Yep.
Look at my dad, 63, passed away 2 weeks ago. I said, they're next in line, and I don't know about you, but do you look at people around and go, you know what, they're old. Like where you used to see them and go, okay, we're now what we probably seen them as when we were little kids, and now our parents are the ones that are getting real old. You know what I mean? So I'm very conscious of time.
Yep.
And about creating memories. So as I'm doing it with my kids, I want to do the same thing with my parents.
Yep.
So we had a massive trip to Europe in June this year. Mum used her inheritance that she got from her mother passing away and said, you know what, let's go and have some fun. So we went to Europe. There was 12 of us.
Wow.
And it was amazing. We went for 6 weeks.
Yep.
And it was just all about creating memories.
Yeah.
You can't take money to your grave.
No.
That's what Mum's really drummed into us.
Yep.
Is money's not everything. But if you've got it, use it to create memories if you can, if you're lucky enough. So that's probably been a big focus, is just really spending some quality time with family. And I'm trying to drum that into my younger brother and sister at the moment now. I said, it doesn't hurt to take mum or dad just for lunch.
Yeah.
Make an effort.
Yeah.
Because I think we get consumed in our day-to-day, right?
Yeah, well, all the messages that we're fed in our daily lives are all about materialism and consumerism. You got to buy this next thing. You'll be happy when you achieve this.
Yeah.
When you obtain this item, or you got to, work hard to get this. And even like the way that in our social interactions, like what do we judge people on? When we meet somebody, we judge them based typically on what they do if we have a conversation with them.
Yep.
Or we look at them and then we go, oh, this person isn't dressed right, or whatever the case may be. Like, I'll give you a great example, so yesterday, when we were at work, we were just standing in the Corso, having a bit of a chat at Manly. And there was this guy, and it was just a very weird interaction. Like, you could see that he wasn't right mentally. But he kept looking at us and like, waving and nodding at us, right? And then turns out that he's actually, one of Richie's high school friends. And like after, I could see that Richie was actually a bit like disturbed by the whole interaction, because he was like, I knew that kid. We used to hang out together. He used to come to my house, and his life has just gone down a bad turn. And it's like, but what can you do for him? Because like, there's only so much you can do for somebody, who's fallen on those hard times. Like, I think one of the things that I sort of reflect on a lot is that every individual has a personal responsibility to be the best version of themselves. You can't rely necessarily on everybody else to always pick you up and take you to where you need to be in life. You need to have that personal drive and motivation to actually want to get there. And so, I always talk about, people that fall into that victim mentality. If you fall into that victim mentality where, you're struggling because of the hand that life has dealt you, you will always struggle because that's all you see. There's actually there's a psychological study, like every time that I would go and work for a different car brand, like, so when I was before I started Mercedes, it was like, I was driving around, I'm like, oh, there's so many Mercs on the road. And then when I went to BMW, I'm like, oh, there's so many BMWs on the road. Now, are there really more Mercs and BMWs on the road at that particular point in time? No, it's just my propensity to acknowledge and identify them.
Correct.
Was heightened because I'm thinking about it, right? So likewise in life, if we focus on those negative things, all we're going to see in the world is negative things, right? Whereas if we're always operating with a sense of gratitude, then we actually find more things to be grateful for.
100%. Yeah. I guess we need to identify that, hey, we're feeling the way we are.
Yeah.
And once you acknowledge that something's not right, it's what you do next. Like you said, if you just become a victim and just, why is it all happening to me? It happened to me at one point where I was going through anxiety.
Yep.
And I said to myself, why do I feel this way? What do it didn't feel right. So I went, fuck it. I called up Lifeline, said, look, I'm feeling this, don't know what to do. Did some counselling. Counselling was okay. Counselling is a great step to talking, but there's no real steps to sort of guide you on actions. So then I went the next step and went to my doctor. Doctor referred me to a clinical psychologist, spoke with a psychologist, looked at what was happening, explored the patterns. And then they gave me some skills around what to do. Wow. And one of the things was to just sit there with anxiety and accept it and say it's okay.
Wait, how old were you when this happened?
Oh, I was in my 20s. And to be honest with you, I think it had to do with the alcohol, had to do with the drugs, had to do with just life in general as well. And that's what I say to a lot of the young kids. One kid who I was working with previously in my other business that I'm supporting, in his mid-20s, responsibility start to kick in. Life is now different to what you were in high school. So there's a lot more to think about. And if you're not in control of your thinking, your things come out in your head. And then when you start to party, you're starting to use alcohol, drugs, the hangover.
It's an escape.
But the hangover is what starts to make you feel like shit. And then you start thinking things and your head starts to take over. So if you're not mentally strong, or if you don't have some form of understanding of what's going on, you can definitely spiral into anxiety and depression. So yeah, I think anxiety in kids, especially now with social media, expectations of what someone cool should be. When you look at girls, their body, their image, what they need to look like. And then you've got the blokes. The blokes have got to be successful. They've got to drive an AMG, or they've got to have a nice watch, or there's this social proofing that people need to sort of get to. And I think it's all bullshit. Yep. It's all smokes and mirrors, but people don't see it, so they put this pressure on themselves to be something that they don't really have to be. They can just be themselves, and I think there's a lot more stress in life because of it. And then that comes into anxiety, especially when you start to dabble in alcohol and the cocktail of drugs as well.
Yeah. So was it daunting when you had to call Lifeline? Like, or what was going through your mind? It was like, I really need help.
Look, I just wanted to explore all options.
Did anyone encourage you to do that, or was that?
No, it was on my own accord. I thought, I'm just going to ring. And I had friends around me commit suicide. My auntie committed suicide when I was young. So I knew that was help around. So I just took it on my own accord to call up. And then, from there, it sort of helped me manage my anxiety.
Mm.
And now I'm in a position where I can help somebody else.
Yeah.
To sort of give them some advice. And what I always say is, I don't want to coach them, but I want to give them some guidance on what they can do. And what I always say is, go seek help.
Mm.
You're not a coward. You're not a wimp because you're asking for help.
Yep.
And I think there's a lot of education around that now in terms of reaching out for help. There's plenty of support there. So if you or you know of someone who is finding it difficult at the moment, I strongly recommend you reach out to your GP, have a chat to them.
Yep.
And they will put you to the right path in terms of speaking to a professional to help not only just listen, but give you some tips on how to deal with it.
Yep. Yeah, wow. Okay. Let's pull it back a little bit, because I'm curious about, what kind of a kid were you in primary school and high school?
Yeah.
So, were you fairly consistent in terms of who you are as a person, or like, did you go through a lot of changes? Like, how would you describe yourself? How would your teachers describe you?
Easily distracted, distracting others, wanting to be centre of attention.
Yeah.
Look, I'm the life of the party. I'm the first one to get on the dance floor and start the party. I'm all about fun.
Yeah.
And that just comes back from my upbringing. So again, my mum was, always about having fun. And that was through school. So I guess because I've got a sporting background,
yep,
going through high school, I was sort of mixed in with probably the wrong boys at times.
Yep.
And then I think the changing point was when I went from year 10 to year 11. Some of those boys sort of disappeared. They left. They didn't carry on. So then I was in the different part in terms of the friendships I made.
Yep.
But for me, it was all about just having fun.
Yeah. So then when it came to, did you have any idea what you wanted to do at the end of high school?
Yeah, look, I wanted to be a PE teacher. I love sport. I loved coaching.
Yep.
So I thought, okay, well, if I love sport and coaching, being a PE teacher would be great. Some stories there around my experience with my PE teacher.
Yeah, shoot.
He was a bastard, I'll tell you what. Even my mum could see it and would pull him up at school teacher parent interviews. I don't know what it was. He just a personality clash, I guess.
Yeah.
But I had high grades in PE. I was doing quite well, but all the other subjects sort of dragged me down a bit. So to get into physical education or exercise science or human movement at the time was quite high to get in, because it was popular to become a PE teacher. Now they're trying to get people teaching by giving scholarships and stuff like that. I wish that was there when I was there. But I wanted to be a PE teacher. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into sport.
Okay. And so then what happened after high school? So did you go on to study, or?
This is the thing. When I left high school, I went straight into the family business and was earning a substantial amount of money for someone, fresh out of high school. And I think it was just too hard.
Yeah.
It was too hard to give up the money, go into uni for 4 years as a postgraduate. ACPE was an option, but again, that was pretty expensive because you had to pay your way through college to get there. But I got stuck into logistics, although it took a lot of your time in terms of you were working long hours, you didn't have a qualification or a degree, and you were getting paid quite well. No one leaves high school and goes, I want to be in logistics.
Yeah. So when it comes to logistics, we're talking like trucks or?
Trucks, yeah.
Yep.
So trucks and warehousing, so in Port Botany there.
Yep.
We sold the business in 2005, and then I just started to work in the industry. My older sister and my brother-in-law still are in the industry.
Wow. Okay.
Up until 2 years ago, I was in the industry as well.
Yep.
But I did dabble in other industries as well. I just got bored. So then I went into real estate. The agent who sold me my first investment property convinced me to get into sales. So I moved into Queensland at the age, it was 2008. So I don't know how old I was, 24 or something.
Yep.
Did that for 4 years, spent more than I made.
It's a bit partying in Queensland?
Bit of a bachelor's pad sort of thing.
Wait. So the investment property that you bought was in Queensland?
Yes.
Okay. And so then the agent that sold you the investment property said, hey, come up to Queensland and become a real estate agent.
Yeah, why don't you get into sales? You've seen the personality that I had. You liked it. You guys, you'd be good at sales. And at that stage, I had a taste of sales in logistics.
Yep.
But the GM wanted me to get into sales, but the director wanted to keep me in the operations because I was good at what I was doing. So he didn't want to jeopardize one to do the other. So once I had that taste for sales, I went, you know what, maybe I will, why not? Yep. I can always come back to logistics. I've got that network, or I've got the skill set that I can always fall back into it. So yeah, I went into real estate.
Wow. And then I guess, what did you learn when you were going through the real estate side of things?
In Queensland, it's different to Sydney. So in Queensland, in particular where I was working, was in the Gold Coast, or the southern Gold Coast, in Coolangatta, Kira. It's an area where investors were buying holiday units, or it was a low entry point for investors as well. So I couldn't afford much in Sydney at the time, so it was more attractive to go into Queensland. But there's a lot of properties for sale at the time. That was just when the GFC had hit, but not a lot of buyers. So you were doing conjunctions with other agents if you had the buyer. Here, completely different. There's no such thing as conjunctions. It's dog eat dog world here.
Yeah.
You know, you got the property, you sell it. You don't let any other buyer come to yours unless you introduce the buyer to the vendor.
Yep.
Quite toxic, I would say. The industry was toxic.
Mm.
In terms of here in Sydney in particular, you were sort of competing amongst agents within your office, let alone agents outside the office.
Yep.
And I just didn't like the stigma that real estate agents had. You know, as a sleazy car salesman, as you probably would notice yourself in the car game.
Yeah, it was. I think there was a list many years ago published, and I remember talking about this because it was like people in the car industry, we were like lower than prostitutes.
Yep.
So, and look, that's not a slight on prostitution. It's more of a slight on car salesmen.
Yeah, true.
So, out of curiosity, when it came to logistics, like there's so many moving parts in that, right? Like obviously there's the actual truckies themselves that will move the items, but then there's like the whole warehousing, handling of the goods, moving it on and off the trucks. Then I guess there's probably like operationally, like all the like the systems to be able to say, okay, who's going where, what are the loads they're picking up, all that sort of stuff.
So you've got a whole array of services in logistics. So like you said, you've got container cartage. So all the container comes in off the port. You need the truck to pick it up. It then goes back to a depot. It could be quarantine inspections as well. Yep. It could be customs inspections. From then, it could either be unpacked. So then once you go into the unpack, there's the whole distribution, 3PL side of things. That's a beast in itself. And then you've obviously got the deliveries back out as well. For me, I was fortunate enough in the family business, I was able to get the skill set across all the different roles within the company. Yep. But one life lesson that I learned from my stepfather, which I hated, was he put me out in the yard with a broom and said, right, clean the yard first. You're not coming in the office.
Wow.
And I'm 18, I've left school. I'm going, what the fuck's this? You know, if I wanted to work for the council, I would sign up to the council and push the broom. But what he did say was, if you're coming into the industry and you're dealing with men, you know, and you're having to give instructions to men, they're not going to take it well from somebody who hasn't earned their respect. So he taught me the lesson, you need to gain respect first before you can start asking these men what to do. Yep. So that's what I did. So I was pushing the broom around the yard. Then I was working in the yard as a forklift driver, and then finally got the opportunity to then go into the office. And a part of the role in the office was allocating the jobs or the containers to the drivers and telling them what to do. Obviously, some didn't like certain runs, others like other runs. So you had to sort of build respect, I guess, for them to take orders from you.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way to do it. That was exactly the same for me in the car industry, right? Like I started as an apprentice mechanic, you know, so I guess bottom rung, so to speak, and then worked my way through those businesses. And I think, you know, one of the advantages that helped me with in the later stages of my automotive career was that there was not a role in the business that I hadn't done. So when it comes to then, you know, providing instruction or trying to, you know, help people to build better processes or whatever, like it's like you have a better holistic understanding of the business. So, you know, when you're asking a question, it's almost like a loaded question because you already know the answer. Yep. But I think, you know, any good people manager will always empower their staff to come to that conclusion, right? Like it's one thing if you're having to direct it, but then you're never empowering your people to actually think for themselves. Yep. And then, you know, your job is constantly firefighting. Yeah. Right. But if you can help to lead them to the right answer and then have them take the initiative to do it themselves, that's the sign of a good manager. Yeah, 100%. Right? And that's a sign of a good operation where, you know, people feel empowered to actually like address the issues, fix the problems, and actually not just fix the particular customer issue, but to fix the process. 100%. Right? So did you have any examples of that happening in logistics, like for your experience there?
Yeah, so basically given that I had the opportunity in the family business to learn the different roles within the industry, when I did work for others, I was a firm believer of cross-training your staff, making sure staff were aware of what the roles were around them.
Yep.
Because then you have a bit of appreciation as well for what the other person does in the company as well. So that was probably one of the things that when I got to a stage of being a manager was to do the cross-training.
Yep.
Have the opportunity to bring a driver out of the truck into the chair so then they can actually appreciate what we go through.
Yeah.
And as soon as they pick up the phone, they see the customer calls coming through, they were looking to get back in that truck ASAP.
Yeah, 100%.
They didn't want to deal with that.
Don't want to deal with the issues.
No issues. They're in the trucks. All they've got to do is take the container to a location and sit there for an hour whilst it gets unpacked.
Yeah.
So, and then internally as well, was around taking advantage of technology and efficiencies. How you could look at processes and how you could make it, how you could streamline processes. And again, I've been able to take that skill set, and no matter what industry you go to, you can sort of draw on those skills to try and simplify the process and lead back to a process.
Yep. Okay. So then after real estate, like was there another industry that you dabbled in, or?
Yeah. So real estate, I came back to Sydney. I tried real estate here. Wasn't my thing. Was looking at ways to get back into logistics. It was at the quiet time. So then I just looked at roles for BDM role and ended up in an OE manufacturer, Schaeffler.
Okay.
Selling car parts.
Yep.
To distributors.
Yep.
I had no interest in cars. Absolutely no
Zero?
interest in cars. Zero interest in cars. My mates had more interest in cars than me, so they made me buy the VL Club Sport, where for me it was a money pit. I just didn't see the value in it. So I'm in this role. I had this French dictator, I will say. It was absolute arsehole. To the point where his family history in France was where he was telling me how he had servants in the family.
Oh, wow.
So he sort of had that in his mindset around his environment with work, and I just couldn't cop it. I was sort of raised by my mum to say, look, if something's not right, you speak your mind.
Yeah.
And I would never, ever hesitate to walk into the director's office and say, hey, look, this is bullshit, this is wrong. And there was a use case where I did do that once, and my manager was going, mate, you can't do that. I said, why not? I said, if I was the business, I would want to know something wasn't going down right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this French dictator, we went to New Zealand and we're at the hotel. We're playing a game of pool, and I beat him 3 times. He cracked the shit. He threw his pool cue. Don't you know how to let your boss win once? And then walked off. So I'm like, okay. All right, that's the type of person you are.
Yeah.
So then we're with the other people in the organisation as well, and I started to realise that they would wait for him to go in and out of the lift first. I was like, why? What's that all about?
Yeah.
It's almost like he had this stature about himself that, and I was like, no, this is bullshit. I said, I'm out of here.
Yeah. I always say when it comes to management, right, and this is a lesson that they don't teach you, or they don't teach any employee. So this part of a bigger spiel that I usually give, but like in any business, there are 3 levels. There's the leadership level, the management level, and the employee level, right? And the way that managers are typically selected, it's like the best employee will become the manager. But it's almost like, when you become a manager, it's like becoming a parent. Nobody gives you the guidebook and says, this is how you be a good parent. It's like, here you go, we'll go and work it out, right? And typically when an employee becomes a manager, like there's 3 types of management styles. It's either they're going to be a manager that operates on fear, ego, or control, right? Like they're either scared. Hey, Christoph, performance dietitian. Now it's now Strive Dietetics, isn't it, Christoph? Rebrand. Okay, yeah. So Christoph Santos, who has also been on the podcast, he's just walked in the door. So shout out to Christoph. Fear, ego, and control, they're the 3 drivers of any manager. And so as an example, the manager who's fearful is the one that's like, you're going to take my role, so I don't want to show you anything. The ego guy, it's like, well, it's all about me. And, my staff might have good ideas, but it's all from me, right? And the control guy is the micromanager that goes and says, okay, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And when you're done, and before you even finish the first task, like, okay, here's what you're doing now, right? Like there's plenty of examples of managers who do that sort of thing. And whilst they all sound like negative things, it's yeah, the good managers learn how to leverage those three negative aspects. So for me, I was definitely the ego guy. So because I got to a senior management position, quite young, and so it was like I got here because of me, right? Which works when you're an employee and you're task driven, right? Who can action the tasks the best? Who can sell the most cars? Who can service the most cars? Like when you're an employee, yeah, it's helpful to be action oriented and to be the ego guy because that's going to get you promoted. But when you become a manager, that's a fast way to lose people's respect, or it's a fast way to actually disempower your people, right? And if you're the control guy, and so I was a bit of ego, a bit of control, I was never fearful anybody was going to take my position because I was too egocentric to think that anybody was going to be good enough to take my position.
Yeah.
Right? So I was the ego and control guy, I would tell people, oh, do this and then do that. And then it's like, I get the shits and I just do it myself, right?
Yeah.
And so you can see like that straight away doesn't empower any of your people.
Yep.
So it took me a few years to actually learn this lesson. And I had to like obviously do a bit of self-reflection and sort of work out, okay. And why it took a few years is because like I got the business to where it should be, right? But it was only after I started feeling really hollow about what I was doing. I was like, what's the point of all this? And, we talked about this before where like, when it comes to people in their careers, whether it's professional fighting, combat sports or athletes, right? It's like, oh, my life will be different when I get to here, right? So as an example, if we take a footy player, it's like when I make the NRL, okay, and then what? Oh, well, then I want to make the rep squads. I want to play in Origin, okay, and then what? And it's like, oh, well, maybe I want to represent Australia, okay, and then what? It's like, okay, well, then I'll have made it. I can retire, and then what? Like, it's like, you get to these points in your life where you think that life is suddenly going to be, you've made it, and then what are you going to do, right? And that was me. Like, I got to this point where it's like, the money I was making was okay. It was good by today's standards. And so I was like, okay, now what? Like this, I don't actually feel fulfilled anymore doing what I'm doing. And so I actually was already, a bit tumultuous in my own mind about, do I need to go and do something else? Do I need to get out of the industry now? And I did stay in the industry for a few years after that. And that was because I actually changed the way that I looked at it. So that was basically, when I left Castle Holden, I got married. And then I ended up at Mercedes-Benz in Wollongong. And that how I reframed myself when I went to Mercedes-Benz Wollongong was that I took a lot of joy in having happy customers. And that was what then fueled me for the next few years in that capacity. And then through having happy customers, like it was all like I would empower my staff to copy the way that I was doing things to also have happy customers. And then I actually found a lot of joy in developing people.
Yep.
And so then that's how like I sort of turned the ego part, instead of it being about me, is like I want to have the best team. I want to have the best people in my business. So, my Troy, who's still sales manager down there, like he managed to win like the rural salesperson of the year and all this sort of stuff. And it was like I was proud of him. Like I don't care about my accolades. I care about theirs more than I care about my own. And so when I went to MacArthur BMW, it was the same thing. Like I was about, okay, how can I develop people? How can I empower my staff?
Yep.
And so that's how like I sort of got out of that. But like that's not a lesson that they teach to managers. It was like you got the management role because you were the best at doing the tasks. That does not make you automatically the best at managing people. It's two totally different skill sets, right?
Yeah, I don't like the word management or manager.
Yep.
I rather the word leader.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you're leading others to build them up.
Yep.
To succeed. And if I look at sport, for example, you could be the best rugby league player, but when you get into a position of leadership, just because you're a great rugby league player or you're good at your field and work, for example, you're the top salesperson, doesn't necessarily mean that those skill sets are going to bring you into a good leader.
Yep.
Like look at a lot of the NRL coaches who are coming from a playing background now getting into leadership roles. Some are failing because they just don't know how to manage people.
Yep.
Then you look at the ones who are great at it. You look at Wayne Bennett. I don't know if you follow rugby league much, but you look at players where you would say they were lucky to make NRL, and then they come upon someone like Wayne Bennett, and next minute they're having their stellar careers because he instills belief. It's not about him. It's about what he can do to bring the best out of that individual.
Yeah.
And that's why I think leadership's so important. And when you talk about management for so many people is about directing to people and telling people what to do rather than lifting them up.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't know. I just like leadership's so important. If you don't have a great leader, it's going to be quite toxic, and it's going to be an uncomfortable position. For me, in my current environment, so I'm working in a startup at the moment, which I've mentioned to you, in finance, no knowledge whatsoever about the finance industry. And it's only that the leader of this startup seen a little quality in me around the hustle that he's now trying to lift me up. And I respect this man so much that if tomorrow he was to turn around and say, look, I'm going to go sell tampons, I'd go follow him. Honestly, I dead set would. Because you just invest time into developing you as an individual to bring the best out of you. And I've still got a lot to learn, but I look back in the last 2 years that I've been working with him now and where I was to where I am now, like I've just developed a new skill. But through his leadership and his belief in growing me as an individual is where I've been able to succeed.
So I guess let's talk a bit about Champ.
Yep.
How did Champ all fit into this piece?
Yeah, so Champ sort of came into it when I was coaching at the stage.
Were you still playing throughout your working career? Sorry.
Yeah. So I was playing until I was about 24. I stopped, moved to Queensland, and then just to make mates, I ended up joining the local rugby league club, and started playing then as well and coaching at the same time. I started coaching when I was 18, so there was always a path where I went, okay, if I'm not going to play, I want to still be involved in some capacity, and coaching was that next step. So had a bit of success coaching, then got introduced into the representative pathways at South Sydney, and then got married, and then had our firstborn. It was hard to juggle coaching because it was full 4 days, and it was a passion. It wasn't a paid job, so you had to sort of make the decision. And then Champ came into the picture when I did marry my wife. One of her family friends knew I was in rugby league and had a network, and he was a dental prosthetist. And he pitched it to me. He said, mate, let's do mouthguards. I went, okay. I never wore mouthguards, to be honest with you. I had the chemist ones as a kid or through my whole professional career. I didn't even know custom made existed, to be honest with you. So I never used it. So when he pitched this to me, I went, okay, well, let me have a chat. I had a chat in my network within the sporting community, and they said, listen, there's one other person who does this, and they've been around for a long, long time, and look, they're great, but it's an 8-week wait to go into their dental surgery to get an impression. So, okay. And then I later found out that my business partner had a provider number, so you could also use your health fund rebates to claim back most of the costs. So it was kind of a no-brainer. So I took the leap of faith with my business partner. He was in his mid-20s. I was 30. And we were working from one of the bedrooms in his parents' place with one machine. It was like a Steve Jobs sort of situation. And it was tough for me at the beginning because my firstborn was just born at the time we established the business, and we were working until 2 a.m. every morning during the football season. And I wasn't around with my wife, so that was quite stressful in terms of the family environment. And at the same stage, I was still working logistics, doing 12, 13 hours a day there as well. So, yeah, it was a bit toxic, but it was a sacrifice that I committed to, and I was determined to make sure it was going to be worth it.
Yeah. So I guess, when you start working those long hours, like what were the things that your wife would say to you? It's like, you're never here, obviously.
I feel like a single parent. You're never here. And one example, which she probably, if I mention this and she hears it, she's just going to get really angry. So we'd gone out to a gym. We did a scan, or we did impressions for the mouth guards. And then my business partner goes, you know what, we're hungry, or I'm hungry. It was at Bondi. So we went to Kelly's at Westfield. And my poor wife's at home with a whinging newborn, hasn't eaten anything, starving, and wondering where I am. As soon as she found out I was eating a divine steak ribeye with, she just lost her shit.
Yeah.
And from that point, I went, oh, fuck. So
I'm going to have to do something. I've got to make it up to her.
Somehow. But these are the things, I guess, there are sacrifices in when you do a startup, and I guess you just got to be conscious, and you don't have to work yourself to death to succeed in business. And I'm only learning that now.
Yep.
And that's what, 7-8 years later.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, Champ's what, 8 years old now?
8 years old in December. Yeah, can't believe it.
It's a long time, isn't it, when you think about it?
It was a crossroad, I guess. It was organically growing.
Mm.
This was more of just a little passion project to get a bit of cash. Organically, it was growing, and it was forcing us to make a decision. What do we do? Do we make this business turn into full-time, or do we shut up shop? Because it was getting to that point. Like, as it grew, it was demanding more of us. And it's a hard point from having a part-time gig to transitioning into a full-time and having somebody work in the business full-time, because it wasn't generating enough income for both of us to get an income to survive off that. So we're still working in our own professions to keep going, to obviously have money coming in to support things. So it was that transition. Well, okay, well, we need to bring someone into business full-time. How do we do that?
Yeah.
So that in itself was quite challenging, and we got to a point where we were able to do that. And that's sort of where we've been successful up until today.
So the initial product that you guys launched with would have been like the custom fitted mouthguard, right?
Yeah. So the only solution we had was we had to go out to the sporting organisation and do the fitting at the gym.
Yep.
Or Oval, or they would have to come and book an appointment with us in our dental surgery. So that was the first business model that we had. Then we've expanded on that to nearly 3 years ago. We went e-commerce.
Mm-hmm. We've
developed a kit. So no longer do you have to book in an appointment with your dentist or have that inconvenience of leaving work early to go and see a dentist. We've now formulated a kit where we can send anywhere in Australia, and they can take their own impressions.
Yep.
And still get a custom-made quality dentist-fitted mouthguard.
Yeah, wow. So then with the kit, like, I guess for people that don't know how it works, like what do you do?
Yep.
So you get this kit from Champ,
Yep.
and then what happens?
Inside the kit, you've got the tray that they would use to take your impression, and you have a putty. So you'll have a red putty and you'll have a white one acts as an activator.
Mm-hmm.
So you mix it in, and then you put it inside the tray, and then you just basically bite down on it, and that registers your bite.
Mm-hmm.
And then you ship it back inside the box that it came with. And there's a reply paid sticker in there for Australia Post. So you can just drop it into an Australia Post box, and that comes back to us. So then when we do get that, we then will create the model.
Mm-hmm.
The model is what we would use to basically fabricate the mouthguard to your teeth. So it's not a ball and bite where it's a one size fits all.
Yep.
This is going to be a mouthguard that only fits for you, and it fits exactly to the micron of what your teeth will be. And it's really, really important if you're in the elite sports, not only for protection, but having a mouthguard that fits perfectly, because the last thing in boxing or MMA, you want to be clenching your jaw just to keep your mouthguard in.
Yeah.
So then when you go down that path and the fit's not perfect and you're conscious about this and you're not focusing on what's in front of you, it also then impacts your breathing. And breathing's so important in sport, in life.
Yeah.
If you're not breathing, then obviously there's going to be an
You'd be
impact. Correct. So onset fatigue is huge in sport. So having a custom fitted mouthguard that allows you to breathe gives you the adequate protection. It's not a one product fits all sports. We do have different products to suit different sports.
Okay.
Which then goes into not only level of protection, but where the protection is. So it's important that through my background in rugby league as a halfback, it's very important to communicate. So having a mouthguard that's too big and bulky, most cases you take it out and you're not using it, or you put it in your sock.
Yeah.
So it's important that the product suits the sport.
Yeah.
There's no point me giving a mouthguard that I would give an MMA fighter to a rugby league player, for example.
Yeah. Totally different sports, right?
Totally different sports.
Different requirements.
Where our product differs from what a dentist would offer. The dentist primary is there just for protection. No thought process into what is in, what that person in sport's going to need to do in their capacity in their sport. So we've tailored products to suit each sport.
Yep. Okay. And then I guess you guys obviously are quite big in the league community as well. I'm just curious about how that stuff came about and how you facilitated all that.
I'm a hustler, mate. I'm a dead set hustler. It's all about numbers for me, even with the dating, I guess. You go see 10 girls, one's going to definitely say, yep, I'll give you a kiss by the end of the night. But it's all about numbers. So for me, I jumped on LinkedIn, and my mission was I wanted to get one NRL club to jump on board. So went onto LinkedIn, looked at all the partnership managers, and I was just bombarding them. And I was relentless. If they didn't respond to my chat, I found a way to find out the club's number, who the person was. I'd be ringing them, I'd be emailing them, whatever it took, basically, whatever it takes. That was my sort of drive. And the West Tigers were the first, and they've now got a soft spot for me.
Yeah, because you were that relentless with them.
Possibly, but Josh Atherton at the time, who was our partnerships manager, was quite smart. He looked at it and went, okay, this is just mouth guards, but this person's obviously got a network in other industries as well. What potentially could we gain from this relationship? So it wasn't just about today, it was about tomorrow. And that aligns with me and my way of thinking. You don't always think about today, you think about tomorrow in terms of the dealings that you have with people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you never know what tomorrow brings.
Yep.
So we were able to partner with the West Tigers first. We were able to support them from a grassroots, so from their pathways programs, which was from under 16s right through to NRL.
Wow.
So it was 150 mouth guards.
Yep.
With the West Tigers. And then once you land one, it's somewhat a little bit easy to land the second and the third. So we were then moving to the Dragons, the NRL Illawarra Dragons. They jumped on board, same thing. And recently, last year we got the NRL Bulldogs.
Yep.
The Doggies had a good relationship with their previous provider, but players were complaining that it was too thick. They couldn't speak. Breathing was difficult. So I said, well, look, give a trial with one of ours. They had ours and they loved it. We had players like Jacob Carraz, who never wore a mouth guard in his career, hated it, didn't want one. And now he loves it.
Yep.
He's wearing it. We've got fans in it.
Yeah. Well, that's it goes in to show that you guys have put some thought into the product, right? As you said, it's tailored depending on the sport that you're playing.
Yep, 100%.
And those things are really important. So I guess, there's two lessons there that you're talking about. One is, if you're thinking about sales, then it's like you got to hustle, right? And I like the approach. We definitely do the same, a similar thing when it comes to sales. Like I would always try and research the person that I'm dealing with as well.
Yep.
So I know, okay, what might be some of their motivators. You try and like piece together a story.
100%.
And it's all, for me, it was always like I'm actually quite bad when it comes to names, but what I'm quite good at is building a story around a person. So if I could remember that it was this person that does this, then it's a lot easier for me to remember that person than just trying to remember, okay, the old thing where people say, oh, you got to try and use their name three times in conversation. No, if I can just relate that person with maybe their occupation or something, like a story.
Yeah, an experience or something.
Yeah. Then I'm going to be able to remember that straight away. Yeah. And, I think HR managers do this really well where they're like, especially when they're reaching out to try and organize like partnerships and things like that. They'd call a company and act like they're just some random, and they're like, oh, who's your recruitment manager? And they'd get the name of the recruitment manager. Then they call back and they'd be more direct and ask the recruitment manager. And so like they do that kind of sneaky sort of stuff that you wouldn't think about, right? And the same thing applies to like sales calls, right? Like when you're trying out, a new sort of sales script or something like that, the first time you make that call, it's going to feel clunky. But once you've done it 100 times, it's like, okay, you sort of know how to weave the conversation, right?
Yeah, and I guess what I'd try and do is find a way to not make it a cold contact. So it could be just an intro or something in terms of following the person on LinkedIn, for example.
Yep.
And then they make a post and then you engage in that post. So then in the back of their mind, they've already come across you and it's not a sales call straight off the bat.
Yep.
You're not selling something. It's more of you're trying to not build a relationship, but engage with them to begin with. So then when your first point of engagement, they know who you are to some extent.
Yep.
And maybe they've clicked on your profile, they've read up on your profile, they know who you are. So there's already some form of connection.
Yeah.
But, it doesn't hurt going in cold as well. But if you can try and make it a warm connection, it helps.
Yeah. See, for me personally, I've never been big on LinkedIn. Like it's too much hassle. Like all these social media platforms, just another thing that you got to manage, right? And my brother's always at me. Oh, get on LinkedIn, do this. I can't be bothered. Like,
yeah,
But like from the perspective of how you're approaching it, I think when it relates to actually the outcome that you want, like that's actually a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah,
right?
It's a tool. It's a great tool to see who is who. You could ring a company and just ring reception. The chances of you getting to the person you need to talk to is nearly impossible. It's, oh, send me an email and I'll forward it off. That person doesn't care.
Yeah.
They don't give a shit. So if you can try and find who the person you need to speak to, then you've pretty much crossed that battle in terms of trying to get to them. Now it's just, okay, well, how can you engage with them?
Yeah.
What can you do to get a response?
Okay, let's switch gears a bit because you brought up relationships before. So
Yep.
I
know I could digress heaps. So pull me back at the line.
No, but I am curious. Obviously, so you mentioned you're a numbers guy when you're young. Like you got to try like to get the outcomes that you want. You got to keep trying, right?
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to you and now being married and family, right? Like that's obviously changed your perspective a lot.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. I'm a little bit curious, if you don't want to talk about it, just let me know. But I'm sort of curious about how you met your wife, and I guess how that sort of influences you in terms of your approach to life now. Yeah.
I think because I've been well travelled, like every year I'd go overseas and have my fun. But it came to a point in life where I thought, you know what, I'm sort of ready to sort of settle down.
Yep.
And I was dating. Dating wasn't quite successful, but I learnt, again, through experiences with each person that I was dating, that there's certain things that I liked and certain things I didn't like. So I said to my mum, again, the relationship I had with my mum, I said, Mum, can you just go and find me a Turkish woman?
Really?
Yeah, because originally I was against marrying a Turkish woman because I was brought up as an Australian, I guess you could say, with my stepdad. You can't hear the accent in the way I talk. I'm not a Turk per se, and my mates used to call me a Quicksilver Turk because I used to be by the beach. But I said to Mum, Mum, can you go find me a Turkish woman? So she spoke to her hairdresser, and her hairdresser had a friend, and that's how it sort of teed up. So it was a blind date.
Yep.
And we went on a blind date, and we just connected. At this stage, I was still traveling.
Yep.
So we were sort of dating, but she knew I was still traveling, so it wasn't formal as such. But I can remember I was in Costa Rica with the boys, and we'd always travel every year with the same boys. There was 4 of us. And we're at the final trip of our Central America trip. And I said, guys, I think this is the last trip. And they said, yeah. And I said, yeah. I said, I think this is the one. So came back, made it official in terms of boyfriend, girlfriend. She had a bit more of a conservative family where you couldn't sleep over or you couldn't do anything until you got married, basically.
Yep.
Me being me, I'm all 100 mile an hour. So we made it official January, and then by October I'd proposed.
Wow.
And then we went looking at places to get married, and whilst we were looking, nothing was available for the following year. So my sales hat switched on, and I said, what about February next year? Oh, have you got any cancellations? Oh, we have a cancellation in Feb. Well, I said, well, no one's going to take it under short notice. So they were charging 160 a head. I got it for $90 a head.
You swung a deal.
I swung a deal. And I know what my wife was like at the time. She does stress a lot and she has anxiety over things in terms of keeping everything organised. So I said, what better to shorten it so we can just get it over and done with. So proposed October, got married February next year.
Wow. That's a cool story. Like at the end of the day, usually when you say wedding, right, like the prices go up.
Yeah.
You managed to do the opposite, cancellation. That's the new buzzword, people.
That's it. And it was quite funny because Cockle Bay's, every Saturday they have the fireworks. So all the wogs from her side basically went, wow, he's put fireworks on for this wedding. How good's this? It's quite funny.
That's smart. 2 birds with one stone.
That's it.
One other topic that I always like to sort of cover off is, what you sort of think of the world when you think about spirituality and faith. I don't know if you have any certain perspectives on this.
Yeah.
But I'm always curious about, how people sort of view those sorts of topics. I'm
very open-minded. So even through school, I did 3 units in religion.
Did you?
I'm actually Muslim by background.
Yep.
But I went to a Catholic school.
Okay.
And
we gotta pause it. Muslim by background, went to a Catholic school, Turkish by background, raised by an Aussie guy.
Yeah.
So I can see all the contradictions here.
You can see it. So I was quite interested in religion, to be honest with you. Got to the point where my teacher in religion actually thought I was being a smart ass when I kept asking a lot of questions and challenging him on the whole Catholicism.
Mm.
And then he started to realise that, hey, actually, this kid's just interested, you know, because
Yeah.
he gave me 3 questions at class. He said, that's it. You got 3 questions. Outside of that, you can't ask any more questions. But he ended up taking a liking to me, and he could understand. And he even said at the parent-teacher interview, he goes, you've got a good kid and you've done well with this kid.
What were you, out of curiosity, what kind of questions would you ask him?
I'm just trying to think. I can't remember now, but I can't remember.
Okay.
But I was just always asking questions. And then, in my HSC, I ended up doing 3 units, religion.
Mm.
And I just loved learning about cultures and experiences of other, like you've got Judaism, you've got Islam, you've got Buddhism, you've got all these different religions. And for me, being a traveller, I always wanted to travel to India and do Nepal. And I haven't done it yet, but it's definitely on my bucket list that I'm going to go do that. But in religion, and I guess we can see this now, what's happening with Israel and Palestinians at the moment. Religion's all about peace.
Mm.
And there's different versions of what the teachings are, but you do have certain people who take it word by word rather than what the word's trying to tell us in terms of the story.
Mm.
So for me, religion has its place. In terms of helping people and guiding people. Some people need that guidance.
Mm.
And I've seen it firsthand where someone was off the rails, partying, cocaine, drugs, this, that, turned to Islam, and next minute, completely different person.
Mm.
Now, I'm not advocating that everyone turns to becoming a Muslim. I'm just saying that religion can help.
Yeah, the structure
can help
that it
people.
provides. Yeah.
And if that's what they need to do in order to bring the best out of them, perfect.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I don't pray 6-7 times a day, or how many times we do, but I take the good out of the lessons in religion and apply it to life. You know, be good to your friends, be respectful, know the difference between right and wrong.
Mm.
So from a spiritual perspective, you know, I take an enjoyment in religion and learning other people's ways of life.
Mm.
In terms of spirituality, meditation helped me through anxiety.
Yep. What, any particular type of meditation? Like, were you doing guided practices, or you were just?
I was doing BNI. I was doing BNI. Do you know what BNI is?
No.
Like a networking breakfast community of people who are in professions, and one of the blokes was a yogi.
Okay.
And whilst I was going through anxiety, I thought, fuck it, I'll give it a try.
Yep.
And he taught me how to breathe. So it's all about mantra or distracting your mind and just breathing and focusing on your breathing rather than what's going in your head. And meditation is pretty cool. So 15 minutes worth of meditation is the equivalent of, I don't know what type of sleep, but it's a deep sleep.
Mm.
And that was amazing. Loved meditation. I'm a big fan of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing Pilates now. It was more feminine, but I love it at the moment. I'm really enjoying it. So between meditation, yoga, and Pilates, I've been quite happy.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I think that's a beautiful way to sort of wrap this one up.
Yeah.
Now, if people want to find you guys, like, what's the best way to find you guys?
champmouthguards.com. That's our website. Jump on LinkedIn. You can find me there in terms of a deeper understanding of my background in my profession, and Instagram and Facebook.
Yep. All right.
Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Cheers.